The Scottish Government's climate change advisers have raised serious concerns about cuts to tree planting. It was announced in December the woodland creation budget was being slashed by 41%. It left millions of tree saplings having to be destroyed. Well, planting more trees is an important part of plans to tackle climate change. Let's get more from our environment correspondent Kevin Keane. Morning, Kevin.
Morning, Gary.
So what have these advisers been saying?
Well, these advisers are the Climate Change Committee, which, of course, provides advice not just to the Scottish Government, but also the UK Government and, of course, all of the other devolved institutions as well. Now, they received a letter from the forest industry body Confor asking for their view on this decision that was made by the Scottish Government to cut the woodland creation budget. And in their response to that letter, they said that they had serious concerns about the decision. They also said that they'd advised Scottish ministers that they need to be planting at least 15,000 hectares of new woodland every year from 2025, and they say that the budget cuts represent a continued gap in Scotland meeting its tree planting ambition. So it's quite a stinging response from this organisation, which is a body that's not known for pulling its punches. They point out that it takes a few years for new woodland to really start the hard graft of soaking up and storing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So if the Scottish Government is to meet its targets of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 3/4 by the end of this decade, then it says it needs to be planting these trees now and at a rapid rate.
And that's why this is so important. It's about meeting those targets.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important for tackling climate change because by 2045 we're meant to have reached this thing that's called net zero. Now that is the point at which we've cut most of our greenhouse gas emissions, the gases like carbon dioxide which are warming the planet. But the plan isn't to have cut them entirely. We'll still have what are called residual emissions, and that's why this is called net zero, not just zero. So there needs to be some way of offsetting those residual emissions, and trees are really the most efficient way of doing that because they are a natural process. They absorb the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which of course helps the tree then to grow, and they release oxygen back into the atmosphere, which we obviously then breathe. And the sums have been done. This isn't just an arbitrary figure. The sums have been done by experts for how many of these trees we need in the ground to achieve that balance by 2045, that net zero target day. And that involves, as the Climate Change Committee says, really rapidly expanding our woodland planting right now.
So what's the forestry industry saying?
Well, they've been left really quite severely smarting by this cut to their budget. That budget was, for the current year, £77.2 million, and then next year it'll be cut 41% down to £45.4 million. Enough, say ministers, to plant 9,000 hectares of trees next year, but that is half of the target for the next financial year, which is meant to be 18,000 hectares. And they say that the government has been investing, the industry rather, has been investing heavily in recent years in things like equipment and technology, but also people, training and skills, because all of the signals from the Scottish Government were of expansion, expansion, expansion. Now they say they'll be having to lay some of those people off and losing them as some of those skills that they've invested in. They've already said that private tree nurseries will have to destroy millions of young tree saplings that they've been nurturing for the last 2 or 3 years ready for planting. That basically involves pulling them up, drying them out and then turning them into a big bonfire. And they say it'll be many years before the industry recovers from this, at a time, of course, when the issue of tackling climate change really needs to be seeing that industry pulling out all of the stops and planting more and more trees.
And what response to these serious concerns from the Scottish Government then?
Yeah, well, they're pointing out that Scotland is already planting more trees than the rest of the UK combined, about 60 to 80% of the UK's total for the last few years, they say. But they also say that the reason why this 41% cut has been announced is because of a cut in the funding that the Scottish Government has received from the UK Government in the form of the block grant for next year. They say that that Westminster decision has serious knock-ons for woodland creation, which, of course, Scotland is doing, they say, for the whole of the UK. And Mary Goujon, the Rural Affairs Secretary, says that she would welcome the Climate Change Committee's support in seeking further funding from the UK government so that Scotland can get more trees in the ground and tackle climate change.
Kevin, thank you very much for that.